All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Godcast, the Goodness Over Darkness podcast. I'm your host, Todd Armstrong, and today's episode number 12 is going to be called 2020 because it is going to be all about my spiritual awakening in 2020 and everything that occurred. So, yesterday I finished up with 2019, pretty much my spiritual awakening to then is Slumber Party was the episode. And I pretty much finished up at where my awakening left off at 2019, even though I did touch into 2020 just a little bit. And I have been throughout the episodes so far. But uh, today is going to be all about the really good stuff that happened to me and how 2020 was the best year of my life, which is odd to a lot of people. But I'm not being facetious. It's really was the best year of my life. And if I'll get into all the things that I did, but maybe if I didn't do the things the way that I did them, I wouldn't have jumped, quote unquote, jumped so many timelines. But I feel like I jumped a ton of timelines because of all the things I was doing. All right. So, uh, 2019, I ended my story. I didn't even talk about what happened to me at Christmas. I forgot to talk about that because my dinner was ready and I got sidetracked with that last story about the clouds, but it was good I tied the clouds all together because it is important for you to all know that and for you to all look up. Whenever you're outside, look up. You don't know what you're going to see. Just look up more often. So, 2019 Christmas, my head was like I said, it was scary when it first popped open. Well, Christmas was like terrifying because so much occurred and just the feelings that were happening to me were so unknown, so foreign, and just like the actual sensation that was going on in my head had me very concerned. But I was also not very reticent to go to a doctor and to get examined, and I didn't want to go to a psychological person and get examined. I don't have a trust of the medical field. I don't believe that they have our best interest at heart. I believe they have an interest at heart, and it's not necessarily the best interest, but they pledge their oath to it. So that's what they think that they're doing the right thing. But by telling somebody like, "Oh, this person really needs help," because they're really concerned because they really think that something would be wrong with someone with a spiritual awakening. But it's just that they lack the knowledge in the field that is in need. So I don't trust that the right things would have been done. So I ended up getting uh, a CAT scan or what did I get? I, I forget, but I think it was a CAT scan in my head just to make sure nothing was wrong and nothing was wrong. So I so 2020 or 2019, that Christmas, that energy, something was happening to me on those 3 days, and if you follow astrology at all, if you even just, a regular person knows that December 21st is a winter solstice, and everyone obviously knows about December 21st now after 2020, with the Great Conjunction, but this is 2019, so Uh, I mean, I know about it, but I don't think a lot of people do know about it, and I don't think a lot of people know the actual, truth behind Christmas. I don't wanna get too off topic here, but, Christmas is okay, so it's very important to understand that the way that it was first set up was that the it's has to do with the zodiac pretty much and the sun, the actual sun that gives us life here. That is what is being referred to, you know, and when we talk about Jesus being born. It's the sun, the sun actually. No, it's just a bunch of wordplay to confuse us all, but it so the sun in the northern hemisphere where we reside, the sun is at its lowest point. Uh, okay, so hold on, how can I explain this? Every day it gets to its highest point at a certain time of the day. I don't know what time that is, but there's a highest point of the day at some point. In December 21st, that's when the sun is at its lowest, highest point. So it's essentially uh, the high point is that's the lowest that it'll go for the high point. So it's hard to explain that little concept right there, but it's the lowest, highest point. And what happens is December 22nd and 23rd, it doesn't raise up, uh, or no, 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 I'm sorry. December 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, it doesn't raise up. It appears to be hanging in the sky. It appears to be dead in the sky, and just that's at its, it doesn't move. It actually does move on the third day. It moves like 1 degree, but it takes an additional day to the to see the physical change. So if you were to, you could take a computer, you could take a telescope, you can do it however you like. On December 21st, the sun, when it's at its highest point, you can track it all the way through. The summer solstice is at its highest point, which is June 21st or 22nd, depends on the year. Uh, but and the winter solstice is between 21st and 22nd too. It just depends on the year. But Uh, so if you track it from June 21st to December 21st, you'll see that there's an arc to it. And December 21st is at its lowest. So it moves slightly. It hangs in like the same degree for, I think, about 2 days typically. And then it raises one, you can see it raise one on the second day. Uh, it's moving minutely for us. Just so it appears that it's in the same spot. So that's the 3 days of Christ being hung on the cross. Not that Jesus wasn't hung on the cross, because he was hung on the cross. But this story goes back before Jesus. Jesus was just a physical representation of the Son, just the human version of what was going on with the Son. So, before Jesus, they all knew that too. And that's Christmas was always celebrated, and we're just told it's Christmas. You know, it's uh, it's very confusing how everything gets, because Jesus was a physical man and Christ was born in Jesus on Christmas, because that's when Christ is born. But Jesus, the physical human, was born in April 1st, April Fool's Day. We'll get into that next episode. But what happened is the sun is hung there for 3 days, and then it rises on December 25th. It rises for the first time, and the the light is going to overtake the darkness eventually. It gets there at the equinox in March. So, it builds and builds and builds, and that's what Easter is representative of, and Passover, because the sun passes over from a certain point in the sky to being, not to having more darkness in a day than light. And when that sun passes over that point, that's Passover. That's Easter. That's what Easter is supposed to be for. So it's very confusing the because the truth is so wide. Just the simple thing of Jesus being born on Christmas Day, that one lie that gets pushed everywhere. That one lie confuses all these different things. So I have to explain all these different things just to get you to understand that Christmas is a very strong spiritual day. And it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew, it doesn't matter what you are, that day spiritually is very powerful. So it was very powerful to me, and uh, it was very scary because I didn't know what was happening to me. And I could just imagine if I could have had a podcast to listen to then, someone telling me about it, I would have been so thankful, but I didn't. And I went through it, and on top of everything I was going through, uh, like I said, a whole neighborhood of people were calling me crazy because of the photos I was taking. So I definitely didn't want to tell anybody. And that makes it harder when you feel like you can't talk to anybody. And that's why I'm doing this podcast so I can talk to those who feel like they have no one, they have nothing, they don't know where to turn to, the people that are disconnected but are just awakening and they're having these weird sensations. That's what this podcast is all about. To tell you you're not alone, you're not weird, there's not something wrong with you. You are perfect the way you are, and you, through your own free will, can choose to better yourself and go down this spiritual awakening and follow the synchronicities, or you can choose to stay asleep and be spiritually dead and have those terrible thoughts that are consuming you. That's how it was for me. I don't want to say everybody's spiritually dead because a lot of normies are probably spiritually awakened just slightly. For the most part, people want to be good and want to do good, so they have upbeat things about them and they want to help people, so they'll volunteer coach or they'll volunteer firefighters or there's a whole thing and it doesn't even have to be volunteering. It could just be holding the door for someone. It could be picking up a piece of trash in the parking lot. People generally uh, I don't know. I don't know if people in general right now want to do good for others. I know that they want to do good for themselves and they think that they're doing good for others if they do good for themselves, but not in the way that they're doing it necessarily. And I don't want to say other people are wrong, but when you're doing oh, all right, and I'm unmuted. Okay. I don't know why Zoom just kicked me off again. Or whatever. It's it's whatever. So, anyway, if you're on the service to self path, you're going to feed yourself and what you think is right and what you want, and you are going how to act because of what uh, what you think is right. Okay, and someone might say, "Well, I'm doing that," but that's not what I'm doing. I'm offering suggestions on tips on how you could better yourself. I'm not telling anybody how to treat somebody. I, you know, it's it's a very when you talk about the service to self path and versus the service to others path, and it sounds very easy, but it's not because you have to do a lot of uh, what someone could make an argument for are selfish behaviors, like taking time for yourself and taking care of yourself. Like I take time to meditate and I set that time specifically for me alone and for, I don't want to be bothered, it's so you could make the argument that it's a selfish thing uh, to exercise. You're taking time away from others. But that's where that's why I'm having a hard time conveying to you the service to uh, others path versus the service to self path because someone could make an argument that everything that I'm teaching is a selfish behavior, which it kind of is because in order to be the best version of you, you have to take care of yourself in the best way. Just like in the airplane, it says, put your oxygen mask on first before you help somebody else. Because if you can't breathe, then you can't help someone else. So if you're not okay, you can't help other people. And not only that, you're going to hurt other people if you're not okay. And then that's going to create more hurt in the world. So it is very important to take care of yourself. But you want to be God of yourself internally. You want to be God of you, holding yourself to a standard way above how the everyday person treats the everyday person. You want to hold yourself to the standard of Christ. Whether you follow Jesus or not, you want to have that mentality of uh, how would Jesus respond to this situation? What would Jesus do? And then that's what you do. Everybody's heard the saying WWJD, what would Jesus do? Well, if you get in a situation, and it's not that, oh, Jesus wouldn't be in this situation, just you are Jesus. So, what would the best version of you, which is Jesus, what would that person do? And do that thing. You start to do that thing, then you realize that you have to take care of yourself first because you're not right with yourself, is why you're treating others incorrectly. You're projecting out to others that they should be treating this group of people this way because they're being treated this way. And nobody should be mistreating anybody. But if you are externalizing how someone should be treating a certain group, then you're dictating that you're God and that you know better. Uh, you're suggesting that your way is the best way, and you're not being God of yourself internally and making sure you are treating everybody the way that you should be treated. Everyone. If everybody treated them, if everybody turned into themselves and said, I am going to treat myself as if I have a high standard and I need to hold myself to this high standard and not mistreat anybody. If everyone had that attitude, then there would be no issues. But instead, everybody is saying, well, you should do this, and you should do this, and you should do this. And that just causes more division. And it doesn't matter how well intentioned you are, how intelligent you are, what evidence or information you have, or what way you go about it. once you get into dictating how others should be, you start treating yourself as if you are external God, as if you know better than all the other humans. And that's not to say that you can't know something better than other humans. Obviously, you can. And it's a very fine line that I'm walking right here to try to make a point because anyone could interpret this as selfish behaviors, as maybe what I'm saying as hypocrisy. But I'm not externalizing what I do. I'm internalizing. I'm telling you about my traumas and my darknesses and how I've overcome them and the information that I've gathered along that way. And the thing that I get more than anything else with my psychic communication is that we are all trying to externally be God instead of internally being God, holding ourselves to high standards and not mistreating people. That's that's what gets conveyed to me more than anything else is that somebody is trying to be God of somebody else. That's just the way it is. And it's unfortunate that there's groups that are mistreated. And I feel that if everybody stopped identifying with words and groups, that you wouldn't be offended anymore because you don't identify with that thing. You leave your identity partially in those groups and things. All right, but we'll we'll get back to all that. But uh, Christmas was I didn't know what was happening to me. And then on New Year's, I go to my brother and sister-in-law's because I was very close with them. We would hang out quite often. My daughter is a year older than my nephew, which their oldest son. Well, they have two sons, but the oldest son, she's a year older than, so they were like best friends. And me and my brother, we were great friends growing up. And his girlfriend no, she was his wife at the time, but she was his girlfriend for like 10 years or whatever. So I knew her, and she was only a few weeks older than me. I think like 3 weeks older than me, or like two and a half, something like that. And so she would joke around and call me her little brother and all. So, we were tight, close knit little group. And, they would always have people over. So whoever, I'm just like, hey, what are you guys doing? He's like, oh, we're having people over. Come on over. So I went over. And my New Year's resolution, so I drank champagne, but I quit drinking for a few months prior because right around my spiritual awakening, which was, I guess, September ish, uh, like August, September, yeah, I think it was late August. I gave up during that summer. I was going out to the bar a lot, and I didn't even really drink, but I started drinking just because I was going out to the bar just to meet some women. I was okay with being uh, alone, but I wanted to have a sexual partner. So I went out to the bar, which I hated, but I wasn't doing the app dating any longer. I did that, and that's just a nightmare. So then I tried the bars, and I got wasted like 3 weekends in a row, and I was like, "That's it, I'm done. Not drinking anymore because I feel like shit afterwards." Up until that point, I didn't really drink, but I would drink like 2 beers or so. Maybe I had a tough day at work, so I drank like a beer or two. Or maybe it's a Friday and I'm drinking a beer or two, whatever. But I didn't drink all that often. So then I gave it up from about August till New Year's. And New Year's, I got myself a little bottle of rosé champagne because I was like, you know what, I want to celebrate a little bit. And on the day before, so had gotten Charlotte already. I told you the stories about her a little bit. And on like the 30th, I was watching this series called Magical Egypt, which was all about Egypt, the ancient Egypt, from the time period that I was telling you guys about yesterday with the when the Sphinx and the pyramids were built, uh, 12,000 years ago, 10,000 BC approximately, and before that. It's even suggested that it goes back as far as 36,000 years because that would have been the last time that Leo was, or the sun was in Leo, would have been, 26,000 years before 10,000 BC. So it could be that this stuff was from 36,000 BC. I don't know. But that's what this stuff came from. And it was such profound information. And if anybody wants to learn about it, go to magicalegypt.com, I think it is. You can go to magicalegypt.com. You can search it on Google. There's 2 seasons. I think they're making a third season. But the guy who started it, I can't remember his name. I didn't even look it up today. But he died a few months back, maybe like a year at this point. But he died, and they have somebody else narrating it. But it's just such good information. So it's basically that all the pyramids and temples, or not the pyramids, but the temples in Egypt are all medical things. They all correlate to the human body in one way or another. And inside each temple is a room, and then inside each, well, there's chambers, not a room, and there's 3 different chambers, and it represents the lower part of the human, the upper body, and then the head. And inside the head, so the head's its own chamber. There's a room inside the chamber, which is called the Holy of Holies, and everything has a Holy of Holies. So that's just your pineal gland. That's heaven. That's where creation, where God touches you, right on your head. So on the 30th, I learned, December 30th, I learned that so the ancients were teaching about celibacy and moving energy up your kundalini. And at this point, I was pretty knowledgeable on the chakra system, and a little familiar with the kundalini. If anyone's ever heard Russell Brand, he's big on the kundalini. So uh, I learned that 100 days of celibacy will ignite your kundalini. And what it is, so it's not just celibacy, but you have to meditate. And it's not just meditating, but you need to physically take yourself to the point of orgasm and internalize it. So you're not externally orgasming. So it's basically you have to internalize your orgasm by imagining. So the way that I would suggest to do it, if anyone's going to practice, is that you want to do it not by touch, but by thought and imagination. Get yourself to the point of orgasm and then internalize it. And what I did by doing this was I could feel the energy rush up my kundalini. Your kundalini is your spine. That's your chakra system. It just runs straight up. And if you're off, people will have like their backs will be off aligned and they'll have issues. That's because your kundalini isn't aligned. It's, getting those alignments at the chiropractor isn't really going to help you. It's only going to relieve the physical tension for a little while until it goes back because it's your kundalini and your chakra system that's actually off. So what you do is you send the energy up. So I learned that on the 30th. So on the 31st, my New Year's resolution became that I was going to do 100 days going celibate. I wanted to do it. So I I started doing it. And what ends up happening is COVID ends up happening. Okay. And I'm not saying that I caused it. I'm saying that COVID existed on a timeline that I jumped to through what I was doing. That COVID a is is the vehicle that we are riding the uh, to a new space and time of Earth. If you could imagine COVID as a ship, there's certain people who purposely came to the ship to get on it to get to where the ship is going. Okay, we weren't on the ship. We were people who we were on jet skis and we could no longer ride the waves, so we caught up and we climbed aboard. Okay, that's what I'm talking about with timeline jumping. And we'll get into that more in later episodes and all that. But I went to a timeline where COVID existed because of what I was doing. I could have kept living my life the same regular way that I was living because I was making good money at filling vending machines. I did well with the mating department. I I I had a decent life. I was coaching softball for my daughter. Hold a second. Oh, sorry about that. So anyway, all right. So I'm back. So anyway, on so that was on January 1st. That became my resolution, and I started my celibacy process. So then, like late January, and I told you I was having all this weird stuff happen to me right around Christmas. So right around January 20th, I start feeling. So I'm already researching COVID over in China at this point. By January 20th, I knew something was happening in the world. I knew that my regular life wasn't just happening any longer, that something new was occurring, that I was experiencing something that I wasn't ready for, that the whole world was. So I was researching and I was always kind of conspiratorial minded. Like I knew 9/11 and JFK and a slew of other things. I was big into Bigfoot and not Bigfoot so much, but aliens and UFOs as a kid. All that mystery stuff. I was always into it. So had that line of thinking, and like I mentioned before, I knew that Pizzagate. I had a feeling Pizzagate was real. It resonated with me very much. So I already had those types of thinkings. But I wasn't on Reddit looking up at any of this stuff. I wasn't on Twitter. Like I had a Twitter for sports only, and I didn't even really use it. Uh, I listened to sports talk radio all day, local sports talk radio. So that's who I would mostly use it to communicate with them. I'd be listening to the radio and then I'd tweet them something, interact with the show type of thing. And I didn't do it that much. So now I'm watching stuff about COVID and I'm seeing what's happening in China. People are just dropping dead. And it was just craziness. And remember what was happening in Australia at the time with the wildfires and the hail and the General Soleimani got killed. It was very trepidation oriented from the first day of January. And I was just reading the tea leaves and I'm telling my family, I'm I get a group text with my brothers and my dad, and I lay it out for them, and I'm like, "Hey, look, I know I'm not crazy because I test my craziness, test my sanity level all the time to see, I check myself. But there's all these things happening, and there's all these uptick in earthquakes and volcanoes, and I'm watching space weather news all the time. And this started back in 2019. I was into space weather news, and just all different types of happenings in the world. So I tell them all this, and they didn't want to hear it. They just, okay. I'm like, look, you guys should stock up. Uh, you should prepare yourselves for a lockdown. And I don't know what that was, but anyway, I tell them to stock up for a lockdown, and I don't even know what that means at the time because COVID didn't happen yet. You know, it's not even over. I think this was like January 25th or something. It was like a day or so before COVID even came here, and I'm telling them, I'm like, hey. Look, I'm watching the news about what's happening in China. There's going to be a lockdown. I was like, look, there's a million people already quarantined. I was like, you guys have to be prepared. Okay. They just think that I'm, you know, some conspiracy theorist. I'm like, okay. So then February comes, and all of a sudden I switch over my Twitter. I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested in sports anymore. So boom, got rid of everybody I had on there. And then I don't even really know how I started following different accounts, but I just start, you start seeing information and you like someone, you follow them, and then it gets suggested that more people who are similarly minded are who are suggested to you. So you just go on and on and on. And so then I find myself on Twitter and I find the QAnons thing. Now, I was having meditations the entire time. Like I said, I was meditating hours at a day, and I was doing it with intent and purpose. I was trying to move energy up my kundalini. I was trying to find myself. I was trying to do all types of different things. I had goals set for myself. Every time I went into meditation, I had a goal and I tried something, whatever it was. I had intent. Well, what I started getting I just before I found out the QAnon conspiracy was in my meditations, I started seeing children being rescued from tunnels, from underground systems. And I had dreams where I woke up. One time I woke up and I remember coming back from Cambodia. So there were 3 days in a row that I woke up at 5:55, which my alarm was set for 6 o'clock each day. So I woke up 5 minutes before my alarm went off each day. And each time I remember coming back from a specific place, just the name of the place where I was in my mind. And when I woke up, just that name was in my mind because that's where I was. And I remember the dream. I was some spirit type figure and I was hovering over the ground and there were people there and they could see me and I was interacting with them. And each time it was a different person right at the very end. They looked up at me with awe and they said, "Who are you?" Because I just saved all of them. And it was one was in Cambodia, and then the next night was Seoul, South Korea, and the third, I forget what the third one was, but I want to say it's somewhere in South America. or I don't know exactly though, but uh, it was very, very strange. And then I find the QAnon conspiracy, and 2 weeks after I find the QAnon conspiracy, so I find it enough to start doing a little research into it, and I'm like, "What is this thing?" And I'm not into Trump or anything, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, "Oh, well, the media is all against Trump, so, there's probably something to this because, I can see so easily that this president isn't being treated like any of the other presidents. Like, there are just attack after attack after attack, and they're basically hoping the country fails, which has never happened before, and we had some bad stuff happen in my lifetime. We had 9/11 happen, we have the wars that haven't ended on terror, uh, the war that never ended on drugs, all these different things. Uh, so many bad things have happened in my existence in America before Donald Trump became president. And never, ever, ever was anything pushed down my throat more than that orange man bad. And I'm well, and I start telling people, I'm like, ask yourself, guys, when did a liar ever become someone who you could believe? And some say, what do you mean? Like, well, you knew the media manipulated stories your entire life. You know that the media only points things out that they want you to look at. When the media says, "Look here," that you should look there. You know those things. So apply that same logic to how they're treating Donald Trump, and be like, "Oh, it's an orchestrated attack because they want you to think he's bad." Now, since I've come to learn that there may be a few possibilities, but there are a few reasons why they did such a thing. But he is ultimately a part of some kind of group that is not so good and is not and doesn't have the best interests of America. And turns out that you can maybe him Obamas and the Bushes and the Clintons, but he's not in their clan. You can see they have their whole clan, and he's not a part of that. So you can see he's different. But there was something made it very real, and I think that that's purposely done because I think that the mainstream narrative understands that there's a certain percentage of people who have no trust for the government and no trust for the media and no trust for Hollywood. So they figure, all right, well, if everybody teams up against this guy, all the ones who don't trust us are going to show themselves. I believe that was a very big component of this, was that they wanted anyone who was conspiratorial minded to come out of the woodwork for some reason, which I can't tell you why. I don't know why. So between the mainstream media's treatment of him, because I started seeing things through new eyes. I started being like, well, what if he is a good guy? What if QAnon is real? Because what they're talking about, say, because that's what started happening was talks on Twitter and on the message boards was that children are being saved from these underground tunnels, and I'm just like, whoa, what? Like, there's no way that's happening because I got that in my meditation. I was seeing it, I was experiencing, I was leading the way. I was showing the in my dreams and in my meditations, I was showing these military members where to find the children. because I couldn't physically do anything. I was just a spirit when I was there visiting these, places that I said I came back from. I was just a spirit. I couldn't physically do anything, but they could see me, so they could follow me, and that's what they did. They followed me down through the dark tunnels, and sometimes it was, uh, like the cages were left unlocked or maybe just a cage or whatever, and I was able to lead children, not just children, but adults too. I was able to lead people out of the tunnels, and they didn't have any military with them, but they saved themselves because somehow, uh, the camp was cleared out. I don't know anything about that, but the camp was cleared out, and so I was leading these quote unquote expeditions in my meditations and dreams. And then I start seeing that it's a conspiracy theory. And I'm just like, oh, this is 100% real. And and that led me astray because it wasn't 100% real. And there was a lot of bad intention and a lot of bad influence that was happening. But what joining that Twitter sphere allowed was my spiritual growth. And that was a very loving community, and it was a very welcoming community. And there was people from all walks of life, and it was online, and I ended up meeting people at the Save the Children rallies that I went to, which I'll get to in a little bit here. But it was a very loving, information-based community. We were sharing information, we were open to ideas. I wasn't into JFK Jr. was still alive and gonna come back, and I told people to get away from that type of stuff anyway. I told them it's not gonna be magical. A lot of people said Michael Jackson was gonna do the halftime show and Trump was gonna have JFK Jr. be his vice president and all this. I'm like, people aren't coming back from the dead. That's not happening. But people find their own niche and they do their own stuff, and that's okay. And I was okay with, you know, being in a community that said a lot of out there shit because I had a lot of out there shit to say. Like what I'm saying now with my meditations. I didn't necessarily say all of these meditations or anything, but that's some out there stuff. So I needed an open-minded group of loving, kind individuals. And that's exactly what I found. Okay, so what ends up happening? We get to the lockdown in March. We have a quarantine. And days before it happens, it's like a week before it happens. So I'm still coaching softball. We had practice all winter and fall long. And then we get to the Saturday before the lockdown occurred. We had our one and only scrimmage, and we were facing a team that was probably a lot better than us. They had more pitching, that more skilled, uh, a little more ready than we were, and we beat them. Yeah, we won, and it was a great feeling because they thought they were going to mop the floor with us, and it was my first time being head coach of the travel team. But we worked really hard all winter and fall, and I put in a lot of work. The girls put in a ton of work, and we came in and we beat them. And not only did we beat them, like we were hanging with them the whole time. It wasn't like we ran up the score at the end when we were down. Like no, it was a tight game the whole time, and we won like 10-8, something like that, and it was amazing. And that day happened to be uh, so the day before that happened to be the 3-year anniversary of my car that I got when my license got unsuspended, when I became, the number 2 of the bakery that I was working for, or the wholesaler bakery that I was working for. I got that car from that job, and it was 3 years later, which I didn't even know, but I had been planning, like, the week leading up to that game, I had been planning on getting a new vehicle on that Saturday, and, Friday night, I get the Facebook notification, "Oh, 3 years ago, this happened." And I'm like, "Oh, shit, I didn't even know," and I've been planning on getting a car the whole time, and you know what? Last year was a leap year, and the leap year had already happened, so it was actually exactly 3 years later. You take out that leap day, then it would have been 3 years exactly to the day that I got this new vehicle, and it was way better, and it was a really good deal, uh, but it was more money per month, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm kinda pushing it," but I was like, "You know what? I like it, I'm feeling it, I'm having a good experience in life at this point, and I'm 2.5 months celibate, and I'm doing all these amazing things in my meditation." Oh, I didn't even mention my Spanish that I started that I've been doing for over 2 years now. So every day, I have a Duolingo, and every day uh, that you keep your streak up. It tells you how long you've been doing it, and you're just supposed to do about 15 minutes a day. And I started like the Christmas of 2018, something like that. Yeah. Christmas Day of 2018 was like one weekend, and because I was out at Christmas, with my family when I thought of doing it, I only showed them I did just one, little test thing, and you gotta do at least 4 to keep the streak going. At that time, you did, and I only did the one, so my streak ended that day, but, uh, then I started since. So it's like 864 days now. Every day I do it. It's just a little goal that I accomplish every day, and what that did for me was that allowed me to start understanding language in a new language and understanding humanity in a new way. And it had me open up my brain to new forms of communication. So, it's very symbolic of what was happening with me spiritually, how I was getting psychic communication all of a sudden. And, that's how my life was going. It was just very symbolic. So I get the new car. I'm feeling good about it. And I go over my brother's house and we're talking about the virus. And I'm like, and I was wearing a mask at this time. So, like, this is the second week of March. I started wearing a mask, like, to, at work around people because I didn't know what was happening. I'm seeing people drop dead all over the world. I see this virus spreading quick. And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna be ahead of the curve." I went and got, uh, bodysuits for painting, not anything too extreme, but for me and I went and I spent a significant amount of money in January, early in January, before COVID reached America. I went and spent about $500 on survival stuff and, because I didn't know what it was, and I saw something was coming, and then it was about to be here. It was on our doorstep, and I'm telling my brother in his home, I'm like, "Look, we're about to go on martial law." I said, "We're going to be locked down, and uh, the world is about to change." And he says to me, "Yeah, well, what if it doesn't?" And I just look at him. I'm like, "What do you mean? What if it doesn't? There's no option. Like it's going to happen." He goes, "But what if it doesn't?" I was like, "Well, I never even thought of that." He goes, "So you didn't even think that what if it doesn't happen and you're a conspiracy theorist?" And then 2 days later, boom, lockdown. And and on Facebook this whole time, I'm trying to wake people up and I'm telling them about everything. And I haven't even seen the clouds yet, so that's not even, on my mind. I was trying to do was I was asking questions to get people to ask themselves questions. So I would be like, every day I put a couple, did you know that the Federal Reserve isn't a branch of the US government? Then I had someone comment like, "Oh, well, that's your fault that you didn't know that." Like, "What my fault? What do you mean? I'm informing people. Like, did you know they're not, that's all." And that's the programming conclusions. It's just crazy. It's because their own perception, they're projecting everything, and once you start to see that, then you're like, "Oh, okay, I get that. I get what they're doing." So, anyway, that was all in March, so that was when my connection with all of them started being severed, and I was like, "I'm done coaching softball," and I was like, "I know we're not gonna play anymore because I can see what's going on." And, I'm doing all the right things as far as the softball team goes with, uh, telling the parents, staying positive and being like, "Oh, let's take safety precautions." Some people want to stay open. I was like, "Look, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna make you guys have a choice. I'm not gonna leave it up to you to then give you the burden of choice of, well, do we risk it?" And at this time, I was still unsure. Like I said, I was wearing a mask at work. My work wanted me to go into old people's homes, and the news was saying not to. Not doing that. I'm not going to old people's homes, uh, just to change out the snack machine. Not happening. I'm not putting people at risk over vending machines. I'm not putting myself at risk, so I'm wearing a mask. Nobody else was wearing a mask. I had so much care, but people wanna talk about now, like, now if you're not wearing a mask, you're not kind. Like, I had so much care and worry that when everybody else thought nothing was happening, I was researching and found that a lot was happening. And I found that I should probably be wearing a mask because there's this unknown uh, air disease that's being passed around, as far as we all knew at that time. So now I don't wear a mask at all because I found, not long after that it was all a psyop. And I'm not going to get into the psyop of COVID. Everybody's done with all that. Nobody, nobody, just whatever. So I have that fracture, and I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm done. And I so I left Facebook. I stopped communicating with my family as much. We had Easter, and I hmm, I don't think that we had Easter. No, maybe we did. I don't remember. I really don't remember what happened, but, uh, I got laid off right, like, a few days after. So when the lockdown happened, we were able to stay open because we were, essential, but at the time, we weren't essential, so we had to apply to, be essential, and it was a whole nonsense that was going on, and I was like, "This is bullshit. Like, we shouldn't be. This is an essential work. If we're all in danger, filling vending machines is like the least essential thing." And I was pissed off. I got laid off. Like, all right, that I was cool because it worked out for me. We all ended up getting paid, which is something I manifested for myself was $10,000, which was something that I uh, was focusing on a manifestation in the end of 2018 during one of my meditations, for a little while, I was trying to get to $10,000, and then, the COVID payments and the unemployment, I got $10,000, like 10,000, just over that. So manifested $10,000. Just didn't happen the way that I was hoping for. That's usually how manifestations go. But anyway, I I was getting unemployment, and now it gets to be July, okay? And it's July 4th weekend, or it's about to be July 4th weekend, and I'm like, "Look, I am tired of all of this. I wanna go somewhere." You know, I was working out like a maniac at the local local track because all the gyms were closed and everything. So I bought one 30-pound dumbbell at Walmart, and I use that for all my exercise, all my curls, my shoulders, my triceps, you know, everything that I could. I would go on the ground and do one hand push-ups, or not push-ups, but like a kind of bench press with them. I do like 30 this way, then like turn my arm out and work everywhere because I was very much into working every part of everything. So I I did a lot of exercises with it, and then I would run the track, and the entire time I was also cleaning up the track, and so this was like the whole of my COVID lockdown. I was doing that. I was meditating. I was doing Tai Chi. I was doing Kundalini yoga. I was doing regular yoga. I was doing all sorts of consciousness expanding practices, and then I get to July 4th weekend, and I have this community of people who are accepting of me on Twitter, and somebody I was bonding with was on there, and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing for the 4th of July?" She lived in Georgia, and it wasn't like we were romantic. We were just friends. I didn't even know she was a woman at first. It's something that popped into, I didn't care to find that out. I was celibate for up until after Easter. It was 105 days is what I went for. And so sex, I defeated that demon in me. That's how ultimately I defeated my sacral chakra, is that I went abstinent, you know, completely abstinent. So I didn't care for that anymore. So by the time that Mimi and I started talking, well, her name, it didn't give way to whether she was male or female, and neither did her photo or anything. And it's not something I cared about. Uh, and I actually, when we first started talking, I thought she lived in Delco because she said, "Oh, yeah, I'm from Delco." So thought she still lived there. But by the 4th of July, I knew that she lived in Georgia because we had talked, and I knew she was a woman. But it's not something that we either of us, you know, cared for. We weren't seeking out a member of the opposite sex to be partners with. We were just, friends who were waking up we had similar things going on. So we were friends. And she's like, "Oh, I'm just going to a party down here and blah blah blah." And I was like, "Can I do you mind if we come down?" And she's like, "No, come on down." So we went down. And this is before the mask mandate down here, and it was so wonderful because there were so many people. We end up going to the beach, and there's people without masks, and I'm just like, "Oh." I'm like, "This is it. This is it. This is where I'm moving. Yes, I feel it." And then a relationship ended up developing between us, but I'll get more into that when I have Mimi on the show. Uh, but it was so magical. And 3 years later, or not 3 years, this is last July. It hasn't even been 1 year. 3 weeks later, I moved from Delco, from Pennsylvania, to Georgia. 3 weeks later. And I didn't even, I didn't know anything other than God put me here because of, I think, all of my consciousness expanding practices and all of the earth points I accumulated by cleaning up trash all over. And it's not that just at the track. And I'm not saying this to for anyone to give me brownie points, but uh, my daughter and I would go around cleaning up trash often. Wherever there was trash out, we would just randomly go places and clean it up. And we actually learned the practice from what's called randonauts. I don't know if they're around anymore, but anyone's familiar with Nick Hinton? He was a big proponent of it back when I started doing it. That was a pretty cool thing. It's randonauts. So Nauts. Randonauts knots. And it's just like an astronaut, but it's random, a randonaut. So you could play around with that thing. It's pretty cool. Uh, so her and I went around and we cleaned up a lot of trash. And what I mean by earth points is I told you this is a video game, and that's just like a bonus game that you get. When you play like Mario and you're going along the regular level, and then you can like go down the little warp, do 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 do. He bunches up, and you play a secret game. That's what uh, I'm talking about when I say earth points. You can do different things and acquire earth points, which the earth or the universe will then repay you later in some way. And my way of being repaid was uh, being shown where heaven is for me, which is my home now that I live at in Georgia. And it took a lot of courage to move down here because what I said happened in March, it got a million times worse when I told them that I was moving to Georgia because now I'm this crazy person to them, and this crazy person with a bad history, a bad background. So to them, it's like I was taking my daughter away from not only away from them, but to a danger is what they had in mind. That I was some danger, that my mom thought that I was moving to some cult. So, the shit they were saying to me was just like the worst. And it was everybody in my family. Everybody had some, negativity. And I had to be so brave to endure all of it. And I'm not saying, oh my God, you're so brave. Like, you guys, you wouldn't believe how brave I am. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the courage that it took. It was the most courage I've ever had for anything. And that includes this podcast, which took a lot of courage to do. But the courage that I had to muster up to move from Pennsylvania and Georgia to Georgia and endure all that abuse, that verbal, mental, emotional, spiritual abuse, man, that'll break a person. It'll make a person not want to ever talk to you again. But, not everyone can see things that they're doing to people. They don't understand what they're doing to people. So it was really hard, but I did it. I I moved, and my daughter moved, and we started our lives here, and it started to become so wonderful right now. And right away, what happened is we were into the Save the Children thing. So we went to rallies, uh, and there was a couple big ones in Savannah we went to. And 2 weeks after was Operation Not Forgotten, which was the operation where U.S. Marshals in Georgia saved 39 children, and then that kicked off a whole string of other U.S. Marshals in other states doing these same type of operations. Remember, there was one in Michigan, and they ended up popping up a few different places. But the first one was 2 weeks after I moved. Not 2 weeks after I moved. 2 weeks after I did the Save the Children's rally in Savannah, the first one. And there was this weird, not weird, but there was this guy who came up to me, and he had this whole he had a mask on, one of those, they call it a gaiter. It covers your whole, like, mouth and neck, and it was like an American flag, and he had sunglasses on, big old thick sunglasses, and he had a hat on, and he had a shirt on, a NASA shirt, and if anybody knows anything about NASA, you shouldn't really trust anyone wearing a NASA shirt. That's all I'm gonna say. He felt very much like a cop of some sort, uh, law enforcement of some sort, and he came up and he said, "Thank you guys, you're doing the Lord's work." A lot of people said that to us, "You're doing the Lord's work," which was very nice. And he came up and shook my hand and all that. But it it felt very contrived, his being there. It didn't feel authentic. Now maybe that was because maybe he was a US Marshal. That was because it felt like he was concealing his identity. People were wearing masks somewhat. It might have been mandated at this point, and yeah, it was in Savannah. But not a lot of people had masks on, especially we were all outside. But he had on the gaiter that took up his whole neck, mouth, nose. He was very concealed, and that NASA shirt just does it for me. So I'm not saying that we had anything to do with that operation happening, but it's just another synchronicity that God was telling me you're on the right path. Because as soon as that happened, then I'm posting that on Facebook, like, see, boom, I told you guys. Oh, and I didn't even get to, okay. So when I move, right, and I'm still meditating this entire time. I meditate every single day, and I get very detailed information. Every single day, I have the most wondrous adventures. It's so awesome. And that's why I keep doing it because it's not only changes my life, but it's a wondrous adventure every day, and it's so fun. So, during this time that I'm about to move, I start getting in my meditations that there's going to be something that happens almost instantaneously after I move that shows me I did the right thing because I said it took more courage to do that than anything I ever did in my life before. So I was like, I don't understand what that means. And I already realized that I've been interpreting things, meditations incorrectly. So I'm just like, all right, you know what? I'm just open to what that means. And what happens, I think it was the weekend. It was like 3 days later. It was the weekend is when I moved, but it was like a Wednesday or Thursday, or maybe it was a whole week later. I forget, but it wasn't very long after the town that I moved from, the county that had like its worst rainstorm ever, and everything was flooded so bad that it picked up vehicles from new and used car lots and just took them all away from several different lots all around. And I moved to the place where storms it was about to be hurricane season, and that this where I live now is supposed to be where hurricanes happen, but it flipped. And as soon as it happened, the communication of, "Oh, told you. Told you were gonna find out right away that you did the right thing, because that storm hit there, not here." I mean, a horrible storm at that, not just any old storm, but I was told what was gonna happen, and then it happened. So it's another thing that I'm being told is going to happen, and then it happens. And all these things, little things keep occurring and they keep adding up and adding up and adding up. And and what happens? I believe it more and more because they keep happening. So of course I'm going to keep trusting it and keep believing it. So that happened in July, or I guess August. It was probably August because it's July 25th is the day that I moved in here. And it's odd about that day is that I just learned recently that it's actually a Christian holiday, July 25th. It's called St. James the Great Day. And my middle name is James. And it was the great day. I moved to heaven. This is my slice of heaven. Where I live now is heaven for me. Everyone has their own heaven on earth. This is my heaven on earth. And St. James the Great Day. My middle name is James, and it was the great day. So, whatever you tell me if you think that's just coincidence. I didn't even know that until I was looking up Christian holidays a few months ago. I wanted to see when all the different holidays were because I started down a path where I was like, oh, well, all these different Jewish holidays have spiritual meaning to them, all these different Christian holidays. So I wanted to figure out which days, you know, what important holidays were coming up, holidays I never heard of before that I started looking into. And that's when I found that one. I was like, oh, that's the day that I moved in. How about that? So, uh, yes, uh, that's pretty much all I want to get into for 2020. I know this is only like July, August area, but I'm going to bring Mimi on uh, uh, in a not too distant future, and she will be co-chairing with me for several interviews, co-host for several interviews. Maybe we'll have a few episodes of just me and her because we have wonderful tales to tell, and I think the two of us are going to be interviewing other couples, or we're aiming to interview other couples for the show. I think that'll be a really fun thing to do to talk about how to find other awakened people when you're awakened, how to heal a relationship, those types of things that you'll hear in my upcoming interview with Stoned Buddha. You'll hear some stuff leading into that. Stoned Buddha from Twitter, not, not Buddha, not the quote unquote deity. Um, all right. Well, I think that's everything that I got for today's episode. And I do want to extend a very special thanks to everybody who's been listening so far because you've put up with a bunch of subpar production, content, audio, not the greatest, someone who doesn't know squat about computer, dogs, people turning off lights, the internet going out on them. I've had so many issues. So I want to thank all of you guys who do listen because I see every episode has about the same amount of listeners. Some episodes are more than others because the name might stick out or whatever. But for the most part, it's been a solid group of people and listening and for your support and for listening to me. Because at the end of the day, I'm just some person saying some things, and that's all it is. So thank you. If you want to get in touch with the show, please send an email to the Great Chakra Awakening 777 at gmail.com. If you want to visit the website, go to the Great Chakra Awakening 777.podbean.com or tinyurl.com/goodness dash over dash darkness. You can, on the website, you can view all of my, or not view, you can listen to all of my podcasts, all my episodes so far. And I have links on the side if you're on a desktop, but if you're on a mobile, it's just at the bottom. I have links to my appearances on other shows on The Wrong Warp with Ketsuban, on Recovering Thought Addict with Alex Coleman, and soon to be The Third Eye Awakening with Amy Belair, which is a very detailed version of my awakening, so 2019 and 2020, but not exactly what I talked about here today. It'll be different. So I'm looking forward to hearing that because we recorded that in March 16th. I didn't have the podcast going yet. And now I have out 12 episodes. So I'm just trying to get all these episodes out so that I have a decent library for everybody to listen to. I like making content. It's a fun thing to do. I like podcasting. It's not only has it been very therapeutic and helpful to me, but it's something I like doing now. It brings me excitement and joy and peace and love. Okay, so I think that is going to do it. Like I said, you have all the links to Facebook and YouTube as well. My YouTube's a little behind because nobody's visited it really, so I'll update it a bunch of stuff at a time. I'll try to get that popping a little bit, but I do have up some of the pictures that I promised from yesterday are up on the Facebook page. I actually uploaded one of the pictures as a thumbnail on the podcast, so that should come up everywhere. And just so you know, when I start doing the interviews, I'm going to have an intro and things will be a little more clean, not necessarily the cursing, but just the way that the show runs. It's not going to be me droning on and saying and a lot. Those are things I listen to myself doing it when I listen back, but they're very hard to stop doing in the moment because they are space fillers. So when my brain is operating and I can't grab a word, exactly the next word, my brain, in order to give myself a little breathing space, I say or or my tongue will click. Believe me, I hear everything I do wrong. Nobody's uh, more, say I just did it again. Nobody's stricter on themselves than I am. Not to say that I'm, again, not to say that I'm hard, I'm just very strict. Okay. I'm gonna do it, everybody. Thank you, everyone on Facebook for doing this. Hold on 1 second. Nope, no comments. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and I will catch you on the other side.